last week, you saw the first of our installment in the special series about the basics of car insurance requirements in Michigan. Today, we continue this series with a deeper dive into what happens if you don't have car insurance. Joining us again, as he did last week, Tom Sinas with the Sinas Dramus Law Firm. Tom, thanks so much for being back with us again today. We'll start with, you don't have insurance. What does that mean for a no-fault claim?
Okay. So for a no-fault claim, it is very important. Let's remind ourselves really quickly. Last week, we talked about the fact that there are criminal consequences. That is the fact that not having insurance can be a misdemeanor. And that, of course, is all true. But beyond that, not having insurance can have substantial effects on your claims if you are injured in a car accident. So we'll start first with the claim for no-fault benefits. Probably good to remind ourselves, what are no-fault benefits? Whether those benefits that people get regardless of fault, as the term is used, and it covers things like medical expenses and lost wages. So what happens if someone is involved in a crash and they didn't have the required insurance, which includes no-fault insurance, as we talked about last week? Well, here the question is really twofold. Was the person injured? Were they the owner or registrant of the car? And two, was that car, the uninsured car, involved in the crash? If the answer to both of those is yes, then that owner or registrant is completely disqualified from receiving any type of no-fault benefit coverage. If they were the owner or registrant, and if that car that was uninsured was involved in the crash. I think it's important to note here that you have to ask both those questions. Because if the injured person wasn't the owner or registrant, then that disqualification rule doesn't apply. Or if there's an owner or registrant who owns a car and they didn't insure it, but the car involved in the crash is a different car, then again, the disqualification doesn't apply. Most commonly, as you can imagine, is situations where owners or registrants are driving their own cars involved in a crash. And in that case, the disqualification rule does apply.
Okay. Wow. Okay. That's a lot. So now we're talking about if you don't have insurance and you're dealing with a liability claim, what happens then?
Okay. Great question. Remember, liability claims different than no-fault claims. No-fault claims, these claims for medical expenses, lost wages. Liability claims, claims against the person who caused the crash. Here we have a similar type ban. And the rule says that if you are harmed because of someone else's carelessness, but you were operating your own vehicle at the time of the crash, and the vehicle didn't have the required insurance, then you, the victim, cannot at all pursue a claim against the careless driver. Now, this is true even if the driver was drunk or on their cell phone. If you owned the car and you didn't insure it, even though the crash was in no way your fault, you cannot pursue a claim for damages against the at-fault driver. What do I mean by damages? Well, it's, of course, those type of quality of life claims that people experience after a serious injury, but it's even something as small as the relatively modest amount of vehicle damage that you can recover from an at-fault party. None of that is available to owners of vehicles involved in a crash that don't insure it as required by law.
Okay, so how can uninsured drivers face a personal liability?
Okay, that's a different question, right? Personal drivers who may not have insurance may lose these claims, but can they face an additional personal liability or personal other liabilities if they're involved in an accident and their car was not insured? And the answer, unfortunately, is yes. Well, first and most obviously, people could have unreimbursed out-of-pocket expenses like medical expense coverage, because as we talked about, if you don't have no-fault coverage and if you don't have health insurance, then you can be personally responsible for your medical expenses with nowhere to turn. The other thing that people need to remember, and this is a little technical, is that if you are an owner of a car and you were required to insure it and you didn't, and someone else is injured and that injured person seeks no-fault benefits, the insurance company that provides those no-fault benefits to the injured victim can actually pursue a claim against the owner who didn't insure the car for the amount of money that the insurance company paid in no-fault benefits. Again, it's a bit confusing. It's what we call a subrogation or reimbursement claim. But the point here is remembering that not having insurance on a car causes the type of consequences we talked about before, potential criminal liability. It flows through to not potentially having your own claims for no fault and liability. And it may, in some cases, extend all the way to your own individual personal financial liability. So it brings us again back to where we started. Boring stuff, perhaps tedious stuff, but very, very important.
Wow. I mean, absolutely. These are things that I've been a driver for many, many years, and this is eye-opening. I mean, got to get that insurance, but still probably lots of questions. What do I need? What's optional? Things like that. What do people need to know if they want answers?
Well, there's a lot of good information out there, Secretary of State's office, for example, but people can also find our website at www.sinusdramus.com. They can shoot us an email at info@sinusdramus.com or give us a call at 616-301-3333.